Hey y'all, I'm Tim. Welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. We got a great video today. Get excited.
Guys, I'm Matt. Today we're going to be talking about a highly requested topic. Today we're going to be talking about how to grow Japanese maples from seeds. So go ahead, subscribe, like, and share. If you enjoy this kind of content, make sure to reward us by subscribing to our channel. Who else is bringing you daily garden content, much less daily Japanese maple gardening content? It's always here on the Mr. Maple Show, 7 days a week. Definitely reward us by clicking subscribe today. And I think you're going to want to stick around for this one. We've got a really good video for you.
How do you grow Japanese maples from seed? Well, first off, let's talk about Japanese maples from seed and their variability.
Now, Japanese maples don't come true from seed. The only way to get a true named grafted variety of Japanese maple is from graft. So by grafting it, we lock in those traits. We have a defined clone with a unique set of traits. Definitely check out our video on why Japanese maples are grafted. It'll be a great explanation into this, and we'll explain a little bit of why we primarily graft our Japanese maples, and that's how the named varieties are reproduced.
Matt and I often joke, we came from the same tree. We have the same parents, but we're very different. Matt can handle full sun. I need protection from the hot afternoon sun. But we do have some similarities. If you look at our nose, we both got big noses. So when it comes to Japanese maples, seedlings are very much like that. They may look very similar, but they may require different sunlights, grow to different sizes, or even have different fall colors, even if they may look very similar when you first look at them.
Yeah, now just like with people, many Japanese maples are going to look similar to the parent plant at first. And like Tim said, you may get into a whole litany of differences down the road that aren't obvious at very first. Now from graft, we're going to keep that same trait and continue it on. So when you graft a Maikujaku, it's going to be a grafted clone of a Maikujaku. Now there could be some differences in growing conditions, but for the most part, you know exactly what you're going to be getting. So think about a grafted Japanese maple like a breed of dog. You know exactly what a Chihuahua should look like. There's some differences, but you're not going to get a Great Dane. Now from seed, you know, it's kind of like a mutt. You can get a great dog, but it might not be all those defined traits you know and expect. So you get an excellent plant. Our grandmother started out growing all of her Japanese maples from seed, so it certainly can give you a quality, very cool plant, but it's going to have an undefined set of traits. So those traits may be new to Japanese maples. They may be very bland. They may be replicating traits of cultivars that are not popular. They may be something new and exciting that we haven't even seen before. And that is some of how new cultivars are found. Now to replicate that trait, it would have to be grafted once it's evaluated from seed.
Now, Japanese maples make amazing plants. And the one behind us is Acer japonica Maikujaku, also known as Aconitafolium or the dancing peacock. It's a fantastic plant. We're going to be collecting some seed on it here in a moment. But when it comes to Japanese maples and seed, one of the most important things is that you collect the seed at the right time of the season. I mean, often people will say, hey, I was out in the spring garden and I saw my tree had some seed on it, so I collected it and I planted it and nothing came up. Well, that seed wasn't fully developed. So you actually have to wait for that tree to fully develop the seed before you pick it so that you can plant it and actually have something come up from that.
Now, since we evaluate plants here, we're sticklers for nomenclature. And because of that, we like to know the parentage of our plants. Now, you might not always know both parents. There might have been a hybridization going on from a different Japanese maple in the garden. But if we're collecting seed off of this Maikujaku, we're going to denote that it specifically came from this garden and from this cultivar. That way we can look for specific sets of traits going forward that we can find. You know, if we find a yellow version of Maikujaku from the seeds, we may be able to look at some other plants in the garden and pinpoint what parentage was there. And so it's a great way to start to evaluate Japanese maples, but also to get more selective in the seed choosing.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really important to keep good notes on this. Often people will say, you know, I found this cool plant, but I don't know what it came from. And if you know what plant it came from, it's easier to compare and contrast how it is different from its mother plant. That's a really important thing to do. We're here in mid-October, and for us, we can actually start collecting seed around October 1st. And I've heard that's very similar for people on the West Coast out in Oregon. You know, if you're in a hotter climate, you may be able to collect a little sooner, but it's gonna be in that early fall time when you actually can collect your seed on your Japanese maples to get a seed that is full, filled out its nutlet, and is a viable seed that then can produce seedlings from that seed.
Now, we graft a lot here, but some years in our peak volume of collecting seeds, we've grown over 200,000 seedlings here at Mr. Maple. A lot of those are used for rootstock. So a lot of those are your small leaf basic green Acer palmatum, subspecies palmatum, that we're using as a standard understock here. Now, a lot of what our grandmother gave us are great for that, and we certainly collect, you know, for that production standpoint. But we also collect for our collector side, where we like to look through new and exciting traits, and we'll be looking through specific cultivar seed for uniqueness. And a lot of those things are easy to find at first, like especially if you have a variegated plant, those are easy to identify at first. Some of those other subtleties may come over time, so it requires a longer evaluation process.
Now, some years have a heavy seed crop while others do not. And some of that relies on how much water you've had throughout the season. If you went through a drought, often a plant will drop off seed early. Or if you've had a late spring frost, sometimes it can damage the flowers or the developing seed, and you won't get a large seed crop like you normally would. So
now, a slightly stressed tree can actually have a large seed crop. So if your tree is going through some drought conditions or a intense stressor that didn't necessarily kill the tree or damage it, but might have created a little less than normal condition, oftentimes Japanese maples will say, hey, we need to replicate, let's get some seeds going, and you'll have heavier seeds crops with slightly stressed plants.
Now here I've got my bag right here. We're gonna go ahead and label this Meiku Jaku. Now, we're about to go collect these seeds. It's so important while you're doing this to label everything you're doing. One thing I'd like to note, if you're collecting seed and planting it right away, a Ziploc bag is a fantastic way. If you have to hold these for any period of time, something like a paper bag will help prevent mildew and moisture and fungus on your plant. So if you're going to hold the seed for a longer period of time before you can actually plant it, use like a paper lunch bag. That's a great way to do it, and you can actually use staples and staple that shut so that the seeds don't fall out of it.
Yeah, whenever Tim and I are traveling or wild collecting in Japan, that's certainly the method we go with. We'll take some paper lunch bags, they're just standard sandwich bags, and they're easy to label, easy to secure. You know, not so good if they get wet and torn open, but they're a great way to keep your Japanese maple seed dry and not mildewy if it's going to be a longer period between collecting and planting. Now today, we're going pretty quick to the planting process. We want to show you guys how we do that. So we're just going to collect here in this Ziploc bag. It's a great way to secure them. And let's pull some seeds and show you what we do there, and then we'll get into a little bit about the planting process.
Sometimes when collected seed, you really have to get in here and look at the seed. On some plants, the seed is smaller or larger on other varieties. Acer japonicum selections have much larger seed, but something like a Shishigashira lion's head, you really have to get in and study the plant over to find the seed, because the seed is so minuscule and tiny that's almost impossible to see unless you just really take time, get into the plant, and look for that seed.
Hey guys, there wasn't a lot of seed on that Meiku Jaku, so we decided to get up here to Hillstone Arboretum, to everyone's favorite Japanese maple to collect seeds on, Makawa Yatsubusa. Now, if all the seed didn't just blow off, we're going to collect some seed on Makawa and show you one of our favorite plants to have Japanese maple variability in.
Now, one thing you may notice is sometimes a tree like this that's in more sunlight may actually have more seed on it. And that may be because those flowers are a little encouraged a little bit more with the sunlight. I've already got this bag here labeled Seeds from Makawa Yatsubusa. And we're gonna go around, dig into the tree, and see where we can find some seed.
Let's get it. All right, guys, we've collected our seed. Now we're moving on to the next process. We're gonna show you how the sausage is made.
So I've got a wooden tray here. If you see, it's got a lot of good drainage in it. Wooden is really the best way to go. We found that a lot of plastic trays, if you're gonna be growing your seeds in a plastic tray, sometimes the plastic can encourage mold and fungus. We've done it in the past, and it does work with some plastic, but you have to be more watchful of fungus developing on your seeds.
Now, these are standard rooted cutting trays. My dad used to root. We actually had this design because Dad would root rhododendrons and into these. So it's basically something we already had here at our nursery that we converted into a way to grow seed.
Yeah, and so the next thing you want is some old newspaper or some paper you've got around. We've got some butcher paper around here. This will actually deteriorate with water as it gets older, and it will give good drainage for the plant still. But we put this in here to hold the soil in because of all those holes that you saw in the very bottom. And sometimes plastic trays will be the same way. They'll have if you put dirt right into it, it'll fall right through. We're just putting a liner down here just to really hold that dirt in place until these seeds sprout out and get some roots to hold that dirt in place for it.
Let's get some dirt in here. Now we basically have a very simple mix here. You can get as detailed as you want with it. There's some interesting germination mixes. We've used Fafford germination mix before. Today we're just getting into our basic dirt mix, which is a 80% pine bark, 15% peat, 5% perlite. So very standard what we actually use here for a potting mix a lot of times.
And the key with this is make sure you've got good drainage. Whenever you're getting seeds in here, you want something very light. If you get something too thick with too big of pieces of bark in it, that can actually sit over a seed and prevent that seed from actually coming up. And so this seed mixture becomes more and more important if you have seeds like Shishigashira. Shishigashira is known for not coming all the way through the soil if your soil is too thick. So you really have to use a germination mix for something like Shishigashira that doesn't sprout out and put a lot of growth out directly from the first growth from the seed.
Now in hotter zones, there's going to be an extra step here. A lot of folks in hotter zones are actually going to need to get their seed. Sometimes they'll even put it in a peat moss mix, but you don't have to do it that way. But then refrigerating it, stratifying it over the winter in a refrigerator. Now we're actually here in zone 6B at our nursery, and we naturally stratify all of our seeds. So we grow them outdoors here. Again, we're zone 6, so we can get down to -10 some winters. Pretty rare for us here. Some people even argue that we're zone 7 here because it's very rare that we get a zone 6 winter. I think I've had one in the last 10 years, maybe 15 years. But excellent way to do them if you can and you're in an area that gets cold enough. Naturally stratifying them is a simple way. Takes this whole step out there. And we basically mass plant these. So we do the mass planting system. You can get as detailed as you want with this system. Some people do the float test, you know, pick the seeds out that are floating, eliminate those from the process, the ones that are sinking.
I like to give them all a chance.
Yeah, we give them all a chance here at our nursery. But very basic skill set here. All you need to do, have you a good wooden tray, some butcher paper, and some basic potting mix. That's all we've done so far.
Now the next thing is we've got the seed that we've collected. We've got both the Makawa Yatabusa seed right here and the Meikujaku seed. And see, we got a decent amount of Makawa Yatabusa seed. I mean, that's a good amount. Really tiny seed. There's a ton there. It took us, what, maybe an hour to collect that? Mm-hmm. So it takes some time in the process of doing this, but it's definitely something fun to do is collecting Japanese maples and growing them from seed.
Now some years we've grown, like I said, over 200,000 Japanese maple seedlings this way. In a really good winter, we get a good stratification going on here. We'll let these be outdoors. We'll actually put a metal screen over top of us to keep mice out of it, and just let it do its own thing naturally over the winter. We'll check that. Sometimes we'll put a little bit of a frost cloth over that getting into March, and then we'll check into that frost cloth. And then as we're starting to see some maple sprouting up, we'll bring those into a greenhouse.
Yeah, and that's the way we do it here at Mr. Maple, because the natural stratification process works in nature at our zone when it gets as cold as it does where we're at. So why not let them do it naturally, see what pops up? It's a fun way to do it. The main thing you got to do is watch out for mice. I mean, mice during the winter, they might try to come in and eat your seeds. That's why that metal screen on top really helps prevent those varmints from getting in there and trying to eat on your seeds.
So we've got another step here. Let's get into it a little bit. Tim's actually going to apply a light fungicide. There's a lot of different things that can work. We typically apply a powdery fungicide to the bag. We'll shake that up a little bit. You know, when we're actually doing this in bulk, we'll have it laid out a little differently, but for demonstration purposes, we've just got a small bag of it here today. We'll go through when we're doing this and do massive amounts. So hopefully coming up in the next few months, we can actually get into mass growing Japanese maples again from seed. Sometimes when we're doing the Area 51, we've grown the entire lower part of our nursery, as in over 10 different houses in seedlings from Japanese maples. And that would be when they're stepped up to that 1 gallon size. We're going through, looking through those for interesting traits. But another step here in the process, a light fungicide.
Now, a light fungicide, something like Captan works fantastic. We've actually got this idea years ago because Dad's a hunter, and he would go out and put out a crop of clover, and you can actually buy fungicide that you put on that hunters use, and actually use this for your Japanese maple seed as well. You can go out and order it online. There's lots of different hunters mixes for putting out your feed crops for your deer that work perfectly.
Simple way to do it at home for a smaller scale.
Exactly. Something like Captan as a fungicide definitely works on a more professional level as well. But I really like putting them in the bag. If you've got it in a lunch bag, it works just the same. You put that fungicide in there, then you shake it up. Get that fungicide all mixed up in your seed. Now, this particular one that we've got is Acer japonicum Meiku Jaku seed. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and label Acer japonicum Meiku Jaku.
Now again, these won't be true Meiku Jaku, but we want to know that parentage that gives us that first clue as to what we're looking for. It's not uncommon sometimes if you don't cover that with that screen, mice may get in here, mix your seed up a little bit, and so you at least know a starting point for what you're working for. But it's a great way to identify, the garden it came from and the cultivar you're looking at. That'll just help you identify what traits you're looking for going forward. So we'll know with this Acer japonicum, we're looking for more of those japonicum style looking traits. Now, another thing we do with this is we actually set that off. We'll block that off a little bit from those Makawa Yetsubusa seedlings because those Acer japonicum seedlings often take 2 years to stratify.
Yeah, they definitely do. And you see I've got a marker here. This is a Milwaukee that holds pretty well outside with the water and all the weather.
It's a mason's pen.
Yeah, but the other thing you can often use is a pencil. Pencil holds up really well on these vinyl labels, and you can write that there, and it lasts for much longer than a pen or a typical magic marker does. So keep that in mind, that a pencil works fantastic for this. But Meiku Jaku, we've got it written here. Now we've got the seed, and we're just going to spread it out over the area here.
Now we've mass broadcast our seed. People have seen these in the spring when we're growing these, and they look like grass coming up because we'll mass broadcast these. We'll actually have to go back in the spring and separate out a lot of these little seedlings that are grown together. We'll wait until they've hardened off so they're not at their softest stage. Typically almost into the summer, but not quite. When that tree is a little bit more rigid and not quite as soft new growth, that's when we'll start to separate these out, get them into individual pots, and let them grow from there.
So what I've done is I've put it in a line just so it's easy to organize. With Japanese maples, like Matt said, we always try to divide them out a little bit. So I'll take some of these extra labels here. Sometimes I'll use some scissors, cut them up, and then I just build a divider with what I've got here for my next set. Because when you're collecting Japanese maple seed, you're often collecting from one plant to the next, keeping everything labeled as best you can. And we've got these now with fungicides sitting here, evenly spread out across. The idea is to get it evenly because you don't want to have them all bunched up all together. It makes it much more difficult to get out at a later time. But we've created a little bit of division. Over here we've got ours that's got our label that says Meiku Jaku seedlings. And then we're going to do the exact same thing we've got here with the Makawa Yetsubusa. And we'll take all this fungicide here, pour that in there.
We've got a lot more Makawa seedlings, so we'll actually spread these out just a little bit more. Makawa is one of our favorite trees to look through for new and interesting traits. Our own introduction here, Red Panda, was a Makawa Yetsubusa seedling we found here at our nursery, going through a large amount of seeds. Now you may ask, are you doing specific crosses? Now we do some of that here at our nursery, but the best way we find to get really interesting traits is going through a lot of stuff. So the natural variability has a ton of unique traits going on there. So you can get so much going on just by simply collecting a lot of seed, broadcasting it, going through a ton of it. It takes a little bit more. It's a little bit more labor intensive to go through that many plants, but it certainly yields those results. Now you have to go through a lot and evaluate it a little bit longer. Some of these seedlings won't show their interesting traits until the 3rd year. And so it's an interesting way to do it. Now we often find that some of your most diverse traits are actually on the F2. So not necessarily collecting from a Makawa Yetsubusa, but a seedling from a Makawa Yetsubusa then yields to the most diversity from that. So a lot of times we'll collect from our seedlings from Makawa Yetsubusa, looking for specific traits that we have cultivated in that plant.
And again, we've labeled this as Makawi Yatsubusa seedlings. That is just for our own terminology, so we know these came from Makawi Yatsubusa. Again, these will not be Makawi Yatsubusa when they pop up. They may have traits very similar to Makawa, but they won't be Makawi Yatsubusa.
A lot of these will turn into bonsai for people. We do offer some bonsais from seed, some Makawi Yatsubusas that are, not necessarily grafted, but, broadcasted this way. We'll plant these kind of thick. We'll spread these out just a little bit here, taking on these leaves that might have made their way in.
And this is the way we've been doing it for years. Our dad sort of started doing it, and people thought it was crazy whenever they looked at our rootstock trays,
Right.
and they looked like grass of Japanese maples popping up. And we've had a lot of success with doing this. And so I'm really hope that if you start trying these methods out in your area, you're gonna have a lot of good success with this as well. If you're in a much warmer zone, say somewhere like Texas, you may have to go to your cold stratification in an actual refrigerator. And if you do that, you can actually sometimes cheat and get your Acer japonicums, which takes 2 seasons of stratification, done in 1 year. If you put them in the refrigerator, allow them to get cold, let them go through a little bit of the stratification period, pull them out for a short period of time, and then put them back in again, you can actually break their shells and allow them to come up so they can actually come out in 1 year rather than 2 if you do that. That is a cheat method with the Acer japonicums.
Yeah, now we like to put a loose layer of soil on here. We typically do this by hand so that we're not burying them too deeply. We're gonna make this much thinner than we were the previous layer. So this isn't gonna go on quite as thick. We're gonna see a little bit of those brown shells coming through as we're filling this over. And really all we're looking to do is provide a light layer here for those seeds to come up in.
And the biggest thing that we have here, the biggest mistake people make at this stage is covering it too thickly. I mean, if you cover these things too thickly, that's where you're gonna have your biggest mistake.
Yeah, it's okay to have a little bit of seeds poking through. They're gonna get some good cold attention. Oftentimes we'll let this get a little wet in a greenhouse, or if we're getting a rain coming in, it's not gonna be, a huge heavy rain. We'll let this get damp just to go ahead, harden that soil up a little bit, and let those get tucked away. We've covered most of the seeds over here on a light layer. This one's ready to bake now. It's ready to go in the oven. We're gonna set this one out. We're basically gonna cover this with a screen now and wait till spring. Again, typically I put a frost cloth over these in March. I'll check them, and then as they start to leaf out in late March, I'll take those and bring them on into a greenhouse.
And down here we actually have some Acer Shirasan Red Dawn seedlings that we actually did the previous year. You'll see here we actually haven't got to pot these up yet.
Right.
But this was a plastic tray. Again, you'll remember that I said wooden trays are much better than plastic trays because they reduce the amount of fungus growing around the plants. But this here, as you can see, we did this exact same method right here. Red Dawn, there's my tag.
These are all ready for harvest. Some of these will get put into 1 gallons. Some of them may get put into liner pots where they continue to grow off and get evaluated.
And on this stage here, you just wait for them to harden off, and then you can pull them out, plant them in your pots, and you're ready to go.
Guys, I hope this gave you some confidence in growing Japanese maples from seed. This is a very simple way to do it. We've kind of oversimplified some things because we want it to be something you can do at home as well. So these steps work for the home gardener. It's a great way to be growing Japanese maples from seed. If you find something cool from seed, remember you heard it here at Mr. Maple. Send us some photos of the cool things you find going through your Japanese maple seed.
Thank you all so much. We've gotten so many questions throughout the years on how do I grow Japanese maples from seed. So we thought we'd put this video out there to help you do it, and especially in the right time of the season. Thank you all so much for watching.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.